So you guys know that the Christian faith is full of traditions, some good, some bad. There are some things that are practiced today that aren't biblical and weren't founded on original Christianity but were later adopted. And one of those traditions is Christmas Day, December 25th, the celebration of Christ's birth, as some people like to say. This is an interesting topic because there's such mixed emotions, and we've had people get mad at us because we don't celebrate Christmas. We don't celebrate December 25th. And they call us atheists, and they say we're antichrists, and they really get upset for not celebrating Christ's birthday. Well, contrary to what some people believe, there is no mention of celebrating Christ's birthday in the Bible. The scriptures are pretty quiet on it. In fact, they don't even tell you what day he was born on, though there are clues. And we're going to get into some of those clues today. But first, let's address the tradition. So I don't celebrate Christmas because it doesn't fit our values, it doesn't fit our lifestyle, it doesn't fit our beliefs. I think most people by now understand that December 25th isn't really Christ's birthday. It's just a day that was chosen. We'll get into that in a moment. But what I want you to think about is the fact that there's very little celebration of Christ happening on Christmas, contrary to what people might think. The majority of people who celebrate Christmas, perhaps, do it in a secular style. They follow materialism and they seek out presents and Santa and trees. A number of atheists celebrate Christmas. A number of people from all different religions celebrate Christmas. So in reality, we understand that the holiday, at least today, has very little to do with Christ and everything to do with shopping. That being said, Christmas wasn't adopted by the Christian church until the 4th century, which is interesting because it came just after the Council of Nicaea, where a group of people got together and decided that Christ was God. It happened right around the same time that the Trinity was being formed and the ideas of Christ's deity were being formed in the 4th century. And it was part of the twisting of the faith. It was part of the Hellenization of the faith. So why was December 25th chosen? Well, some people say it goes back to other pagan gods that were also celebrated on December 25th or around that date. And that is true. There are others. And some people take it as far back as the birth of Nimrod's son in Babylon. So we're not sure exactly how far back the date of December 25th was celebrated, but we do know that it was part of pagan culture, and perhaps the church wanted to give an alternative to the pagan festivals by creating a Christian holiday on the same day. And as an alternative reason to choose December 25th was based on an ancient tradition in ancient Judaism and early Christianity, where the ancient Jews, some of them had a tradition that holy men, righteous men, would die on their birthday. So if you were born on December 25th, you would die on December 25th. That was just a tradition. But some Christians interpreted this tradition to think that these holy men would die on their conception dates instead of their birth dates. So Christ died on what they assume is March 25th. And so they said, well, if he died on his conception date of March 25th, then his birth date would have been 9 months later, December 25th. So that's how they get to that, through pagan tradition and through misunderstanding the tradition of holy men dying on their birthday, thinking it was their conception day, and then counting forward to their birthday. It's very confusing, and that's how they got there. And as such, some people choose not to celebrate it because they know it's not truly his birthday, and they see the worldliness, they see the paganism, they see the materialism, and they just don't want to take part in that. You know, some of us, what are you going to do? You just don't get into that. It's not your thing. And I don't think people should be judged on that. And today I'm not telling you what or when to celebrate. I'm just explaining and letting you guys make up your own minds. So what I want to present to you today is a new idea, and this is going to show some of you guys how much you rely on tradition over Scripture, because even if I offered you a better day to celebrate Christ's birth, I know that some of you wouldn't. You wouldn't do it for Christ because the birthday isn't important. Celebrating Christ isn't as important as celebrating the tradition of Christmas. And for many people, traditions come over faith, over truth, over Scripture, such as the Trinity, where you can point it out in a Scripture where the Trinity is not true, but they hold to it because it's tradition. Tradition comes greater than Scripture, than faith, than truth, than anything in many people's lives. And that's why I'm challenging you with these videos on this channel to come back before the traditions were added and look at the faith as it was given to us. I ran into an interesting article online, and I'll share the article. I'll link it below so you guys can read it. I'm not going to be reading from the article, but I'm going to read a comment. A comment that sums up the article very nicely and lays out evidence of Christ's birthday being on a very interesting day of September 11th in the year of 3 BC. Now, September 11th is a very familiar date. That's going to stand out to you guys. You know that that date has a lot of meaning. But putting that aside, let me read this comment that somebody made regarding this date. The idea that Jesus was born on September 11th, 3 BC, comes from a combination of biblical inference, astronomical data, and historical context. This date is not explicitly stated in Scripture, but some scholars have proposed it based on their study of biblical texts and celestial events. Below are some key points from the book, Jesus Christ, Our Promised Seed, supporting September 11th, 3 BC as Christ's birthday. Revelation 12 describes a celestial alignment involving a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars. Scholars and researchers, including those referenced in Jesus Christ Our Promised Seed, interpret this passage as symbolic of a specific astronomical configuration visible in the constellation Virgo. Using precise astronomical calculations, this alignment is shown to have occurred on September 11th, 3 BC. Additionally, the timing of the Roman census, described in Luke 2, supports this time frame. Historical records indicate that the census would likely align with a period when people returned to their ancestral towns for registration, a practice more practical during temperate weather such as early autumn. Matthew 2 further describes the visit of the Magi, guided by a star in the east. This celestial phenomenon, often identified with the conjunctions of Jupiter and Regulus, or the heliacal rising of specific stars, aligns with the same period in 3 BC. Census timing. The Roman census in Luke 2 likely occurred in the fall of 3 BC, aligning with favorable travel conditions and the harvest season. John the Baptist's birth. Calculations based on priestly divisions place John's birth in March 3 BC, making Jesus' birth 6 months later in September. Star of Bethlehem. On September 11th, 3 BC, Jupiter rose in the east as a morning star, guiding the Magi. Hebrew calendar. This date aligns with Tishri 1, Feast of Trumpets, symbolizing kingship and new beginnings. These elements combine biblical, historical, and astronomical evidence, making September 11th, 3 BC a plausible date for Jesus' birth. Now, if you read the article, it goes more into depth about Revelation 12, where it describes, let me read it to you. And a great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed in the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child, and she cried out in her pangs of birth, in anguish for delivery. In anguish for delivery. And another portent appeared in heaven, Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems upon his heads. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, that he might devour her child when she brought it forth. She brought forth a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which to be nourished for 1,260 days. So some people take that and they use that to try to interpret that as being the birth of Christ and when that might have occurred, along with all the other historical and scientific evidence. Like I said, they're saying September 11th. That's very interesting. I want to give that to you guys to think about. You can read the article, you can read the comments, you can do some research. You'll see that this isn't an idea that's obscure, but it's actually something with evidence behind it that many people adhere to. So, if you're looking for the birth of Christ, maybe September 11th has stronger meaning and stronger support than December 25th. And you have to ask yourself, would you be willing to change the day that you celebrate his birth? And I'm not telling you to, but I'm making a point of how strong traditions are. So, I don't know, just wanted to give you guys something to think about today. I thought that was interesting as we're creeping up on September 11th, that maybe on that day you will think maybe today is Christ's birthday. Looking forward to your thoughts, and I hope you guys research that and see what you think.